The Debrief. Part 1. Initiation. They say guilt fades with time. That's not true. It learns to hide better. My name is no. It doesn't matter. Names are just labels we assign to shame. For the Americans, I am Dr. Emil Kruger. To those who remember what I've done, I am something else entirely. They took me in 1947. Not with chains, no. With contracts. A second chance. Help us win the new war, they said. Your skills are valuable. And I nodded. I was taken to a remote facility in the Nevada desert, buried under layers of classified clearances and moral ambiguity. A former Nazi physician, now a consultant for the very country that bombed Dresden to ash. What irony. What convenience. My work was supposed to be technical. Data. Physiology. Trauma response under extreme stress. But the Americans, like the Reich before them, wanted results. And I knew how to deliver them. They gave me an office on level 3, room 21. Gray walls. No windows. No clocks. And a single file dropped on my desk each week, stamped with the same code. Project Remus. Remus, the twin of Romulus. One devoured by wolves. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I spent my days reading and evaluating candidates. Men broken by war. POWs, defectors, double agents. But today was different. I was called to a debrief room on level 5. Security escorted me. 2 guards. Silent. When the door opened, I expected another stack of paper, another profile. But instead, there was him, sitting across the table, handcuffed, wearing a hospital gown. Head shaved, eyes wide, pale, terrified, like a man who had seen God and found nothing there. The file said, Subject 614, formerly SS under Sturmfuhrer, now believed unstable. I sat down, picked up the recorder. State your name, I said. He hesitated, lips trembling. Then, Franz Vogel. I knew that name. Not for files. From life. 10 years ago, at Ravensbrück, I saw Vogel for the first time. He was young, bright-eyed, and eager. A medical intern from Munich, assigned to assist my unit. Back then, he believed in the system. In me. I remember his first autopsy. He asked too many questions. So I made him participate. I told him, if you cut deep enough, all ideology bleeds the same. He vomited, and I laughed. Now, here he was, hollow, ruined, trembling like a man standing on the edge of his own grave. You don't remember me, I said. He looked up, and for a moment, the fear turned to something colder. Recognition. You're not real, he whispered. They told me you were dead. Not yet, I replied. He started muttering numbers, coordinates, fragments. His hand shook. I pressed the recorder. Why are you here, Franz? He stared at me. To remind you, he said. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. His voice was barely audible on tape, like it had been swallowed by static. But one sentence stood out. They buried it under the ash tree. That phrase sent ice through my chest. Because that's what we called it. The ash tree, a field hospital outside Warsaw, where the real work had happened, where we stopped being doctors and became something else. I tried to dismiss it. Coincidence. Delirium. But that night, I dreamt of the girl with no face, of the screams we had called data, of the cellar beneath the ash tree, and the smell that never went away. I requested Subject 614 be sedated. I needed time to regain control. But that afternoon, security informed me. He had vanished. No signs of escape. No broken doors. No force locks. Just an empty chair and a single note under the table. It said, You cannot unwrite what's already carved in flesh. Later that evening, I found my reflection staring too long in the mirror. Not judging, just waiting. The guilt hadn't faded. It had matured. It had learned to speak. And now it had my voice. Part 2. Confrontation. The Americans called it hallucination. They said subject 614 had suffered a psychotic break. Stress-induced trauma. War fatigue. Their solution: erase him from the log. Bury the paperwork. Classified anomaly. But anomalies don't leave messages. And they don't know your secrets. For 3 days, I said nothing. I pretended that Vogel was a ghost, that my hands weren't trembling, that I didn't wake each night to the sound of whispers bleeding through the walls of room 21. But then the lights began to flicker, only in my wing, only when I was alone. On the 4th day, they brought me another subject. Project Remus, File 615. Another former officer, this one from the Eastern Front. Pale, malnourished, a gaze like someone who's been digging his way out of hell with his fingernails. He didn't speak much, just sat there, until I said Vogel's name. Then he smiled, like a wound opening. You saw him too, he said. I leaned forward. What did he say to you? He said. The man's eyes rolled upward. That we're not ghosts. We're graves that remember. I froze. Those were the exact words from the note Vogel had left behind. I checked security footage. Again, the audio was corrupted. Video smeared by static. Only one frame was clear. A flash of Franz Vogel, standing behind subject 615. One blink, then gone. I told the tech team it was a glitch. But I knew better. The brain has ways of protecting itself, of distorting pain into fiction. But fiction doesn't haunt the hallways. Fiction doesn't leave claw marks on your door. I started digging. Old records, hidden logs, trying to find the original files from Poland. But they weren't there. The Americans had cleansed the archives when they brought us over. New names, sanitized CVs. They wanted our knowledge, not our history. But some things can't be bleached. There was a name that kept showing up in redacted margins. NIM. No surname. No photograph. Just a line of medical notes. Subject displayed high resilience to neurochemical thresholds. Observed empathy reversal under prolonged isolation. Final phase incomplete due to facility shutdown. That was my handwriting. Anna was 12. We told ourselves she was special, that we were pushing the boundaries of human understanding. What we did was strip her down to nothing. Not just skin, identity, language, hope. Day after day, we tested her limits. Then one morning, she stopped speaking. We called it progress. But Vogel used to whisper apologies to her when he thought I wasn't listening. I laughed at him. You're confusing science with sympathy, I said. Now, I can't remember her voice. Only the silence that followed. 2 nights ago, I heard knocking. 3 slow taps. Then a pause. Then 3 more. It wasn't from the hallway. It came from inside the room. Behind the cabinet. Behind the old, sealed door that hadn't been opened in years. I moved the shelf aside. Dust spilled. The doorknob was cold. When I turned it, it resisted. Then it opened. Just a narrow room. Storage, I told myself. Except the walls, they were scorched. And on one of them, scratched into the paint, were the words, "She remembers you." The next day, I found a photograph in my desk. It hadn't been there before. It was creased. Old. For people in lab coats. Me. Vogel. A third man I barely recalled. And the girl. Anna. Except her eyes had been blacked out with ink. On the back. Phase 3 begins when the doctor becomes the patient. I demanded a psych eval. Not for me, for the system. I told the Americans that we were experiencing mass delusions, that someone was hacking into our logs, manipulating our minds. They asked if I'd been sleeping. They gave me pills. They smiled politely. But I saw the way they looked at me, the way I used to look at them. Curious, detached, ready to dissect. I realized in that moment that I wasn't trusted anymore. I wasn't valuable. I was a relic, a reminder. That night, I locked the door, pushed the desk against it, turned off the lights. But the whispers still came. Only this time, they had form. I saw Vogel standing by the corner, his eyes red, face twitching. And next to him, Anna. She didn't age. She didn't blink. She just watched. And I finally asked, "What do you want from me?" Her mouth moved. No sound. But I heard anyway. Confession. I don't sleep anymore. I sit in this office. Room 21. Waiting for them to come again. I told the Americans I needed isolation. To process data. They agreed. They always agree until it's too late. I know what's coming. And part of me wants it. Because somewhere in the ashes of that field hospital, beneath the roots of the dead ash tree, there are bones that still whisper, and secrets that still bleed. Part 3, Reckoning. They say memory is unreliable, that the brain edits pain, reassembles facts, filters what we can't handle. But what happens when it stops filtering? When everything comes back at once? I woke up on the floor of my office. Not sure how long I'd been there. Blood on my sleeve. A cracked glass on the desk. The tape recorder was running. That was the first thing I noticed. It clicked softly like a heartbeat. I reached for it and pressed rewind. The voice that played wasn't mine. It was a child's. A girl. Calm. Precise. Phase 3 begins when the doctor becomes the patient. Click. Do you remember the screams? Or just the charts? Click. You said I was resilient. I was just quiet. You never listened. Click. Then silence. I left the recorder running and opened the drawer. Inside was the folder I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Operation Nebelwald. Ash Forest. The field hospital in Poland, where we worked in secret, where rehabilitation meant erasure. I hadn't looked at those files since 1944. They were meant to be destroyed. But here they were, as if someone had gently placed them back into my hands, as if someone wanted me to see again. The documents were more than reports. They were confessions disguised as science. Temperature thresholds, sensory deprivation, psychological reversal under isolation stress. Anna's name appears 12 times. Final entry. Subject ceased verbal communication. Heart rate abnormal. Nightmares reported by adjacent patients. Behavior considered contagious. Contagious. As if trauma could infect. As if grief could be passed like a fever. Maybe it can. I returned to the debriefing chamber that night. Alone. Same room where Vogel had appeared. I sat in his chair, closed my eyes, and waited. The lights flickered. Then the walls began to breathe. She came first. Anna. She didn't walk. She arrived. Like thought given shape. No scars. No blood. Just presence. Then Vogel. Standing behind her. Watching me. Judging. I didn't know. I whispered. A lie I'd told myself for years. Anna said nothing. Just pointed. And suddenly the room wasn't a room anymore. It was the cellar. Poland. 1944. Cold. Metal. Screams in the walls. The cot where she had slept. The chair I always sat in. The lights that never turned off. I was there again. Not remembering. Reliving. The clipboard in my hand. The cold, clinical language. Subject uncooperative. Session extended. I see myself younger. Calm. Detached. Methodical. I hated that man. But I was him. I am him. Suddenly, the cot is empty. Anna's voice cuts through the air. You called it science? It was fear. I try to speak, but my mouth won't move. Vogel walks toward me. He's crying. We could have stopped it, he says. We chose not to. The room shakes. Ash rains from the ceiling. Bones rise through the floor. They surround me. Patients. Subjects. Names I never learned. Faces I never looked at. And all of them staring. Then comes the sound. Not screaming. Not weeping. Just breathing. In unison. Like the lungs of the forgotten exhaling all at once. I fall to my knees. And in the corner, I see it. The real file. The original file. Anna's full name. Her story. Her final words. I reach for it. But it bursts into flame in my hand. And with it, The room dissolves. I wake up gasping. Alone. Or maybe not. Because on the wall behind me, in fresh red ink, tell the truth. I go back to my quarters. I begin writing. Not a report. Not an analysis. A confession. Everything. The tests. The fear. The silence. The moment we stopped being human and called it progress. Outside, the base remains quiet, but the whispers never stop. And each night, Anna returns. Not to haunt me, to make sure I finish. Part 4, Closure. I once believed truth was like a scalpel. Sharp, clean, precise. But it's not. It's a flood. And once the dam breaks, it drowns everything. I finished writing the confession. 12 pages. No denials. No euphemisms. I described every procedure, every decision, every justification. Then I signed it. Dr. Emil Kruger. 1941 to 1945. Guilty. I didn't know where to send it. So I left it on my desk. Let it rot like the truth we buried. They came for me at dawn. 2 American officers. No handcuffs. Just silence. They didn't ask questions. They didn't look at the document. They just told me, "You've been reassigned." The van was unmarked. The road long. No words exchanged for hours. I stared out the window as the trees began to thicken. Not just any trees. Ash trees. Poland. We arrived at what used to be a research facility. Now overgrown. Half buried. The forest was taking it back. One of the soldiers handed me a file. Inside was a photograph. Anna. But this time, she was older. Not 12. Maybe 20. Maybe more. Eyes hollow. Expression unreadable. Below, a line of text. Reintegration incomplete. Host shows persistent fixation on primary source of trauma. And then one last line. Subject requests debriefing with original doctor. The chamber was deeper than I remembered. The lights still worked, flickering like old memories. She was already there, sitting calmly. Same posture, same silence. But now I felt it. The weight, the history. I sat across from her. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, just said, "Do you remember what you did?" I opened my mouth. No sound came out. Not at first. Because truth isn't something you say. It's something you bleed. I told her everything. Not just the procedures, but the fear, the pride, the shame I buried under syllables like compliance and data points. She didn't speak. She just listened. And that was the worst part. She had every right to scream. Instead, she gave me silence. Like a mirror. I thought I was helping humanity. I said. She tilted her head. "You were helping yourself." And with that, I broke. I wept. Not for her. Not for them. For me. Because I had become what I feared most. A man who forgot how to be human. When I looked up, she was gone. No door opened. No sound. Just gone. And on the desk between us, a single sheet of paper. My confession. Stamped. Received. They never returned me to the base. I live in a small room now. Stone walls. No windows. They call it observation. But I know what it really is. It's a tomb. A place to keep things that should never be unearthed. Every night, I hear footsteps. Sometimes Anna appears. Sometimes Vogel. Sometimes the girl I never dared name. The one from room 3. The one who stopped speaking after 23 sessions. They don't haunt me. They visit. To remind me what truth costs. I write now. Not reports. Letters. To no one in particular. Sometimes I burn them. Sometimes I leave them folded under the bed. The guards pretend not to notice. I think they're afraid to read them. I don't blame them. Because the worst monsters aren't born in shadows. They wear coats. They speak softly. They say words like efficiency, advancement, greater good. And when it's over, they call it science. But it wasn't science. It was fear dressed in logic. It was a scalpel without a soul. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But maybe, someday, someone will read this and understand that history isn't just ink on paper. It's blood that still stains, breath that still lingers, and names we tried to forget, but who never forgot us.